The Merchant of Venice is a problem play. It's a tragedy and a comedy at the same time. It can be played as either simply by making one character, Shylock, appear sympathetic or ruthless. It's a play about greed and privilege, and the dangers of conflating the exchange of money with the exchange of love. It's a play about hostility to difference and the impact that those hostilities have on a community that permits it or even fosters it. It's about those things and so much more. Over the next few weeks, I'll be breaking down this play act by act, but before I get started on Act 1, there's some stuff that's good to know before you start reading, so that's what we're going to do today. The Merchant of Venice, most people agree, was written and performed somewhere between 1596 and 1598, and then published in the quarto of 1600. So that puts it around the same time as plays like Romeo and Juliet and A Midsummer's Night's Dream. The Merchant of Venice, as with many of Shakespeare plays, has some very clear source material. It's based on a 14th century tale by Giovanni of Florence. That story is called Il Pecorone, and it has a lot of similarities with the Merchant of Venice. In it, a wealthy merchant funds the expedition of a young man who wants to pursue a lady in Belmont. To that end, the merchant takes out a loan against a pound of his own flesh, and, that's pretty much what happens in The Merchant of Venice. The similarities are many, and so are the differences. In the play we will be reading, the lady in Belmont can only marry somebody who picks the correct casket. That doesn't happen in Il Pecorone. He got that from somewhere else. Shakespeare, as usual, just puts a bunch of different stories in a blender and produces something more complex than any of its individual sources. That's what he does, and arguably that's what all artists do. Having Italian source material, this play takes place in Italy, Venice, and Venice is something of a character in itself. The setting is important because in Elizabethan England, Venice means something. Certain cities have reputations, and putting a story in those locations, that means something. A city like Las Vegas, for example, will become a character itself whenever it's the setting of a story. Venice is like that. So we should talk about the reputation of Venice among people living in early modern England and what it actually means to them. Today, Venice is a place that sits in our collective imagination, a place where people hold hands riding a gondola or whatever. But in the early modern period, Venice is a place of exchange. It's a port city, a place filled with sailors from all over and where goods travel between Europe and the Ottoman Empire and Northern Africa or really anywhere else. In the opening act of this play, for example, we learn that Antonio, the merchant, has ships in Mexico, Tripoli, and the Indies. Because of this, Venice has a reputation for diversity. Lots of people do business there. Venice is the place of cultural and financial exchange. It's a place where customs and laws regarding exchange intersect, where different people with different belief systems have to do business with each other. A place where tribalism has the potential to turn violent. Consequently, Venice has the reputation for valuing the supremacy of the contract above all else. A Catholic, a Protestant, a Muslim, and a Jew could all be in a contract together, and fidelity to that contract is more important than any group loyalties in Venice. All identities and loyalties are subordinated to the authority of the contract. If the motto of Las Vegas is "what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas," the motto of early modern Venice is "what happens in Venice is dependent on what the contract says." And the primary location of these business transactions is the Rialto, the famous bridge in Venice that is the site of all these deals and negotiations. To say the Rialto in early modern Europe is like saying Wall Street today. It's the place of global exchange, which takes us to a particular financial term central to this play: usury. Usury is simply lending money with interest, but to use that term, usury, is to describe that behavior negatively, to give it a negative connotation. To use the word usury is to code the practice as a sin. The general idea here is that if somebody has enough money, enough to lend it to somebody who doesn't have money, then it is immoral to charge a fee on that money. Someone who has enough should not charge someone who, by definition, does not have enough. But Obviously, it's more complicated than that. In this play, Antonio and Shylock are going to get into a few arguments about this practice as a moral issue. Antonio believes it's a sin. Shylock believes it's a natural and necessary feature of complex systems of exchange. Elizabethan England had a complicated relationship with the charging of interest. Like, about 50 years before this play was written, England repealed all of its laws against usury and permitted up to 10% interest rate. Then, during Elizabeth's reign, England waffled a bit, and sometimes it's legal and sometimes it's not. But by 1570, according to a source I read, Elizabeth legalized 10%, a moderate rate, but still declared the taking of interest to be a sin. So officially, it's legal. It's commonplace. So people are doing it, but they're still uncomfortable with it. It's a legal sin. Knowing that will help you understand some of the tension in this play. In the play, Antonio represents the old system of lending money. He lends it without taking interest, and he's taken advantage of. So his system is characterized as being naive. And on the other side of this equation, we have Shylock, a man who has no problem at all charging interest. Indeed, his entire business is built on it. And he's attacked frequently on the Rialto because of these practices. So his system is characterized as immoral, as predatory. So it's complicated. This play allows this issue to remain complicated. To lend without interest is to misunderstand the world. To take interest is to be hostile to the world. One interesting thing to note here, as we read on, is that Shylock can borrow money from his friend Tubal without being charged interest, just as Bassanio can borrow money from Antonio without being charged. So if you're part of the same community, if you're part of Christian Venice or part of Jewish Venice, then there is a trust within that community. Money can flow freely without the need of a contract if there is some combination of trust and love. But this is Venice, a place where lots of communities come together. So if money is borrowed, then it needs a contract. It becomes a business. Which brings us to the issue of anti-Semitism in the play. There has been lots written on this topic, and if it's of interest to you, I highly recommend reading James Shapiro's classic book, Shakespeare and the Jews. I'll put all the citation info in the description below. This play does indeed depend on anti-Semitic assumptions, and this requires a bit of context. The Jewish community was officially expelled from England in 1290, so Shakespeare's understanding of Judaism would be extremely limited. He's crafted Shylock based more on the reputation of Judaism than on any authentic understanding of Judaism. I'm not going to be involving myself in any of the conversations about Shakespeare's sympathies in the series. I tend to agree with Shapiro that to assert a Shakespeare sympathetic to the Jews or critical of them has become as much a political as a literary judgment. Since Shakespeare has become shorthand for English identity, arguments about his sympathies are really arguments about what it means to be English. A play is not a diary entry. We do not know, and I am neither English nor Jewish, so I'll keep this issue mostly at a distance. But Shylock's identification as a member of the Jewish community in Venice is central to this play, and the important thing to note is the hostility that any group has toward any outside population in this play. Antonio hates Shylock because he is Jewish. Portia hates Morocco because he is black. Prejudice based on religion, race, gender, and social class run throughout this play, and the result, as we'll see, is a questionably happy ending where the final emotion expressed is fear. It's a problem play. And here's how we're going to deal with it. Every episode, I'm going to focus on a larger theme within the play as we read each act. So episode 1 will center on Act 1, and we will focus on desire and the aspirations of each character. Some want love, some want respect, some want freedom, but they all want something that currently eludes them. In Act 2, we will focus on risk. In order to get what they want, each character will have to risk something. Given that this play is about Venice, the city of transaction and trade, something needs to be given up or offered as collateral if the desire is to be obtained. Something needs to be risked. In Act 3, we will focus on the many transformations that happen in this play, and there are many. Just the character of Jessica will transform from a daughter to a wife, from Judaism to Christianity, from female to male and back again. And she's not the only one. Each character will change or adapt to changing situations or circumstances. In Act 4, we are going to focus on mercy, the tension between justice, revenge, and forgiveness. In this play, mercy can be weakness, strength, or something in between. In the final act, Act 5, we're going to look at Belmont, the location of this act, as a form of paradise. It's common for Shakespeare to have a setting distinct from the main action of his play, in this case, distinct from Venice, where everything can be resolved. The critic Northrop Frye calls these locations green worlds. The general idea is that a problem in location 1, Venice, and then a calmer, more reflective location, 2, Belmont, is the place where this problem can be resolved, and this allows location 1 to carry on problem-free. Venice is location 1, and we might be able to view Belmont as location 2, but it's complicated. Many characters in this play put their faith in Belmont to save them, and in the final act of this play, we'll see if that faith pays off. Finally, the last video of this season will focus exclusively on the character of Portia. She's endlessly engaging, and perspectives of her have changed dramatically in the 400 years since this play was first performed. So I'm going to dig into some of those interpretations, and we'll see what happens. I hope that you'll follow along as I take this complicated text play by play and see if there's anything to learn from it. Subscribe to be notified when a new video is out, and thank you for watching.